Hello there and welcome. I'm waiting for my system here to update. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started. So, good morning and thank you for joining me. If you are here live, make sure you say hello. If you are watching the replay, then just post hashtag replay in a comment so that I can know that you are here. So today we're talking about anxiety and how anxiety affects the legacy that we leave our children. And I think a lot of us as parents, we are worried about this. We know that how we feel impacts our children in a lot of different ways. So that's one of the things that we are going to be talking about. So the three main guiding questions is focused on, or the three main guiding questions are focused on anxiety. And so first, let's talk about, is it a good thing? Like, is worry is when we're anxious, and let's define what that means and when it serves us and when it doesn't serve us, and then how that affects our children and how that affects the legacy that we are leaving them. So we want to begin with the understanding that energetically our children are tied to us. So depending on how old they are, so you want to consider how old your children are. So are they quite young and they're still dependent on you? Are they becoming independent? So maybe teenagers, older teenagers, and then to young adults, where maybe they're still at home, depending on you to provide for them. And then when they're launched, right? So once they've started their adult lives, they're working and they have their own families, and they're much more independent. So, depending on where you are and where your relationship with your children is, then you're going to have a different way of thinking about how what you're dealing with energetically affects them. So the more that they are connected to you on a daily basis, even when they're younger, the more that they're dependent on you, then the more that they're affected by your energy because they're around your energy all the time. So should we worry that our energy is going to affect them? And I would say yes, definitely, because our positive energy is going to affect them. And then any negative patterns that we have is also going to affect them. So we want to make sure that we are considering um, both of those things. So we want to minimize the negative effects, right, while maximizing the benefits. And so, and that all has to do with our relationship with our own energy. So we're going to start that. So being concerned and knowing that your energy affects them is very important to, and I would say, should we worry? Well, we should be conscious of it. Now, we shouldn't rev ourselves up in terms of, oh no, there's nothing that I can do, because there's definitely things that we can do um, to make sure that we are passing along the positive energy, right? So that they're being affected by the positive, and that we try and minimize or counteract the negativity. And that's basically the basis of my work, and my focus is to teach ways that you can do both of those things. So how can you maximize the positives and then minimize the negatives. And we need to start with ourselves. And that is the kind of crux of everything, is that we need to start with ourselves, because that affects our children. So how we treat them, of course, affects them. How we speak to them, so anything that's overt and anything that is um, kind of out and public, on display, and that you are projecting consciously, of course, that's going to affect them. I think where we need to be much more intentional are those things where we think it's just us. Like, these are things that we need to deal with, and we're focused on them more than we are focused on ourselves. And I think that is a huge mistake, because the energy that we have and our relationship with ourselves, that has such a huge impact on our children. And it doesn't matter their age. Like, they're going to have that, it's going to have that effect on them. So I think it's much easier to think of the effects when they're external. When we think about our behavior towards them, how we are speaking to them. But all of that is affected by our energy, by how we are feeling, and how we engage, and how we deal with the anxiety or the worries or the challenges that we are facing, because those directly impact how we show up for our children. And so when I say, is worry a good thing, again, we need to be conscious, and we need to be aware of what those are. And that goes back to the teaching that I shared with you last week, which had to do about awareness and how we build that awareness. So if you haven't watched that video, then I would suggest that you go back to that. But just worrying to worry is not beneficial, of course, right? But just being concerned, so that then that moves us and that catalyzes into action, then that is a good thing, because we want to be conscious. We want to be pretty, we can be pretty sure that our energy is affecting our children. Like, it doesn't matter what their age is. And of course, the more they're dependent on us, then the more they are affected by us. And there's certain, depending on how you work with energy, but one of the things that I work with in terms of healing relationships and focusing on relationships has to do with these energetic connections that we create with our children, that they create back with us. And so there's nothing that we can do about those energetic connections. They're there. Like, if we have a relationship with our children, those energetic connections are there. And so what we want to do is we want to make sure that those energetic connections are clean, right? That the energy that we're transmitting to them is positive, right? And they're growing. And that's part of that legacy we leave them, is our relationship with them. And so how we show up with them, how we engage with them. And so so that's one of the things that we want to make sure that we focus on. So let's say that you come home from a long day of work, and you are stressed, right? You're trying to put food on the table, you're trying to make dinner, and your kids are focused on things that they have to do. So if they're doing homework, or they're worried about their own friends, or they're worried because they are having trouble with their job, with their colleagues, right? So the problems of our children are going to be different depending on their age, but they're still going to be concerned about their own issues, right? Whatever it is that they are um, dealing with. And so, how do we show up to um, engage that relationship with them and those particular issues, whatever it is um, that they are experiencing, right? So if we show up with impatience, if we show up with disinterest, right? If we show up with low energy, right? If we're not able to listen, if we're not able to pay attention to them, then that is going to, that's definitely going to affect them, right? And so, and why does that happen? I mean, we don't show up that way because we intend to show up that way, right? We show up that way a lot of times as a result of our own problems and our own energy and our own issues that we're dealing with at work or with our parents or with our health, whatever the situation may be. So that's why we need to focus on ourselves so that then the way that we show up with our children is energetically much more supportive and is energetically is much more positive with them. So I think that one of the ways that our anxiety can serve us is because it is a window into the fact that there are things that we need to deal with, right? If we are feeling anxiety, that means that there are things that we need to heal. These are issues that we need to deal with and we cannot ignore them. So a lot of times what parents do is they think that um, the way to show up to benefit their children is to not worry about their anxieties, to kind of push them down and so that you can be present to your children. But that's a pattern. And so what are your children learning, right? So you can say, well, I'm showing up for them. Yes, but they're also learning to push down their anxiety because that's what you are doing. And so there may be other patterns that show up. So for example, you may start talking to them or engaging with them in similar ways that your parents did with you. And so when you see that, so maybe your mom would shout at you when you were not focusing on your homework, and now you're doing the same thing, right? Or now you see your kids are having troubles with their friends, and you're at a loss as to how to help them, right? And that was something that your parents did with you, is like they were always absent when it came to your problems, like they let you deal with them on your own. So these are patterns that keep repeating, right? These are patterns that keep showing up. And so, and this is one, and so when we're starting to feel anxious, that is the positive thing, right, about feeling anxious is that it is giving us a sense that there's something there that we need to deal with, right? We don't want to push it down. We don't want to ignore it. We don't want to leave it for later. Like what a lot of parents do is like, I'm not going to deal with that problem until like they've gone off to college, and then I'll go ahead and deal with it because I know, okay, like I set them up for success, right? They're over there studying and getting their degree. Now I can focus on myself. And so a lot of parents wait until the time when they feel like their kids are okay, now they can start focusing on themselves. However, that doesn't actually work because one of the things that happens is we're still energetically connected to our children, right? And so they're still learning from us and they're still seeing our patterns. And so you don't want to be stuffing down your problems and your anxiety until they're older, right? You want to be dealing with those issues as soon as you can. And so feeling that anxiety is really your energy telling you like there's something here, we need to deal with this, and we should deal with this now. And the issue, of course, the problem is our culture teaches to maybe just soothe ourselves, but not really get at those underlying issues, right? And try to resolve them. Because when you resolve them, like if you resolve that anxiety, then you can show up more. And that's what I say when I say that you can have this clean, energetic connection between you and your children when you resolve what's in you. Because if you don't resolve what's in you, that's always going to be present in that connection with your children. So, definitely, anxiety can serve us because it points to where we need to start doing our work. Um, but where it can hinder us if we are thinking that the way to deal with this is to ignore it and to not face it, and to think that there's that it's normal. Like a lot of people go through life feeling really anxious, and they either medicate so that they can function in their daily experience, or they self soothe in a lot of different ways. And so, a self soothing can look like watching too much TV, like having too many beers or too many glasses of wine at the end of the day, um, um, disconnecting um, in different ways, right? And so maybe over exercising. So there's a lot of different ways that we think, well, these are ways that are helping me with my anxiety. Like, so I take this medication, or I have this glass of wine, or I go work out for 2 hours, right? So some of these things culturally we know can become a problem, like the alcohol. But other things are seen more as more neutral, like the TV watching, right? Is seen as more neutral. The exercise sometimes is seen as positive. However, like, why are you doing those things? And if you're doing those things to soothe, and you're never getting to the root of what is causing the anxiety, then the self-soothing actually is just a method. It's just a way that you kind of squash that anxiety and like push it down. It's like, I don't have time to deal with it now. And as long as it's under control, then it's not going to affect my children. And that I'm sorry to tell you, but that is not the case, that it still affects them. Um, and so it affects how you show up. And then it affects that connection that you have with them. And so that is so critical for us to understand, especially those of us that are conscious of the way that energy works, and that we want to learn how to manage our own energy, how to really master the energy that we create, because anxiety is just energy, right? That's all it is. Um, and so, how your energy is being used, there's some energy that you create that actually creates these positive results. And then there's energy that we create that creates these negative results. And so, anxiety on its own is not good or bad, right? What is bad is when um, we aren't dealing with why the anxiety is there, like what is happening. So a lot of times, in order to start dealing with it, we need to self-soothe. I mean, that's important. So there's a lot of somatic methods. And in fact, I was on Instagram, and I liked a video on a somatic strategy. Um, and now I'm getting a bunch of videos on different somatic strategies, and so they're all helpful. They all work to an extent, right? Because yes, we want to be able to calm down, like we want to be able to self-soothe, But self-soothing isn't enough. Like we want to get to the root of why is it happening so that it stops happening, right? We want to be able to solve it. We want to be able to find a solution that's long term, not just something that's going to help me right now so that my heart stops racing and I can like take a deep breath and I can like shut my mind from all of these worries that I am feeling. And so depending on how strong your anxiety gets, right, it can be really low level anxiety where you kind of just feel a vibration in your chest to full blown panic attack, right? So there's continuum in terms of what anxiety feels like. But I want to tell you that there is a solution. Like there is a solution, and the self-soothing is just the beginning of that solution. That's not the solution in itself. The solution is you getting to the root of what's causing the anxiety, and then solving solving that. We can do that energetically. Like there's things that we can do energetically to get to understand what the root is, and then to heal that long term, not just for right now, but to heal that long term. So that's some good news, right? Some good news that yes, there's something that we can do about it, and that's not just temporary. And this is one of the things that you'll hear me say over and over and over is that we want to not just get at the surface problem, right? So the surface problem with anxiety would be that heart racing, right? Or that what the fact that we can't shut off our mind, and so we can't sleep at night because we have all of these thoughts going. That's also a way that anxiety shows up. So we can be when we self-soothe, that's kind of a surface level solution that doesn't get at the root of the problem. And a lot of times the root isn't one issue. Like a lot of times the root, once we go in and actually work with it, we'll find that there's a lot of things that have been building, right? So let's say you're 42, right? So you've had this pattern of um, however it is that you deal with your anxiety, you've had this pattern, and as we get older, then if we don't deal with it, then progressively gets worse. And if we're just stuffing it down, then we need to keep using these strategies, or we keep learning different strategies to kind of manage our anxiety. But it's still we're still avoiding it, right? But it's still there. We haven't gotten rid of it. We haven't gotten to the source so that we can actually heal it. And that's what is so important. And that's a lot of what traditional medicine doesn't do. Like traditional medicine doesn't get to what the root of the issue is. And even if you go and have an energy healing that's more passive, it still doesn't get to the root, so usually anxiety issues, the root level requires self-awareness. Like it requires you knowing what those are, and then so that you can make changes in your life. So if you just go get, for example, if you just go get an energy healing, and if you do a distance healing, usually there's very little awareness that comes with that. So you may feel better for a little bit, but you're not going to get to that awareness level so that then you can make those shifts in your life, so that then you can make those changes. So what I want to think of, I want you to start thinking of anxiety as this signal from your body that there's something that's ready for you to deal with. And so you want to start dealing with it as soon as you are able to. Now, I want to talk a little bit more about how it affects our children. So, like I said, so it affects our children at two general levels, right? So, so it affects how we show up, and that's usually when we're worried about how our anxiety is affecting our children. That's usually what we're worried about. We're worried about this outward behavior that we're starting to see in ourselves, and we may not necessarily like it. Like we want to be showing up in a different way. Like maybe we want to be patient, right? And we want to be present with our children. Like we want to feel this close connection with them. Um, and so we see that that's not happening, right? We may be impatient. We may say things that we don't mean, right? We may get triggered by their own behavior. So they may start acting up, or what we consider acting up, whether that's back talking or misbehaving at school. So they're starting to behave in ways that we don't like, and we know that it's not those ways of being are not beneficial for them in the long run. Or maybe they instead of acting out, they're doing the other, like they're shutting down, or they don't have any friends, right? They themselves, you start seeing that they have anxiety, and that is a way, something that they are not going to have to deal with, right? And so they may end up going the same route that you went, right? Which is seeking medication and seeking self-soothing methodologies. And so we start seeing these patterns start repeating in in our children. And so that then we say, like, what can we do? Like, what can I do? How can I help them? And so you want to, one is you want to help yourself, right? So you want to help yourself first, because when you help yourself, and especially when your children are with you, like live with you in your household, then that's going to affect how you show up with them, like the energy that you have around them. But even if they don't live with you, how you still show up with them whenever you do engage with them, whether you're talking on the phone, or whether you talk on video, or whether you have visits, right? So all of those are ways that you engage with them, and you want to have these open lines of communication, and you want to be able to connect with them, and you want to have, and so even if you're on the phone, or if you're on a video call, you want to be able to connect, and you don't want to argue, right? Or you don't want to um, um, you want them to be able to open up to you and to share what is going on in their lives. And so um, so I just mentioned like twofold the way that it affects our children. So one is how we show up with them, right? And then this energy that still gets transmitted, and that starts to look like a pattern. And then you start seeing that same pattern that you have, you start seeing it in them, right? So whether it's misbehaving, or whether it's a shutting down, or you start feeling disconnected from them. And when that disconnection is part of that effect, because they start, if our energy is anxious, then part of what they do is they're going to want to self protect, and they're going to want to pull back. And so one of the reasons, like, I can speak about this in such detail is because the clients that I work with, when they start working with their own energy, we start seeing how at the root of whatever energy they're working with is something that they experienced when they were younger, when with their parents, with their caregivers, right, with the people that were closest to them. And so what they experienced then comes back and then shows up when we're adults, like when they're adults. And so it becomes easy to kind of see that pattern, and we can understand where it came from, right? And we can get to healing that particular issue, and then so that you can not react in the same way, so that your energy system is now different, because when you heal it, now your energy system is different. So you can start creating new results. You can start creating new ways of being, not just for yourself, but for ways that are going to affect your children. Because, of course, everything that we do in a way ends up affecting them. And so we want to be able to, one is have that awareness, right? Have that awareness of this anxiety is showing me that there's something here that I can work with, right? There's something here that needs to be healed, right? Getting to that healing, so then that allows you to show up differently, right? And so those are things that we can, those are kind of the steps that we want to be able to take. And so I hope this has been helpful for you in learning a little bit more about anxiety. And I hope that you start seeing anxiety not as something that you need to avoid, but really as a signal from your body that there's something that needs healing. And I hope that you start to seek that help, right? And I want to invite you to reach out to me. So that's something that I help clients with. And then we can look specifically. So one of the things that I do with clients is that we do this kind of diagnostic, because anxiety may just be one thing that is happening, and that may be part of a bigger issue that you want to kind of explore and that you want to heal. So we first work with doing a more general diagnostic to see where should we start doing that work so that you can get the most benefit. So I invite you to reach out. You can schedule an insight session. You can schedule a call with me so we can get to the root of what that issue is, what that anxiety is that you've been feeling, so that then you can transform the way that you parent, the way that you show up for your own kids. And then, of course, that transforms how you show up in all your relationships. So transforms how you show up with your partner, with your friends, with your extended family, with your parents. So thank you for joining me. If you have any questions, feel free to put them in the comments, and I will be on the lookout for those, and I'll come back and answer them. Okay? So have a great rest of your day, and we'll talk to you soon.